That was excellent, Pastor Andy. Really appreciate it. And it's one of those messages I think you might even want to take time to go over again during the week. And it's will be posted on our website and also on Facebook. And so, yeah, as Pastor Andy said, which quadrant are you in? Are you going to actually think about it and do something with it? What will your actions show? How did it make you feel? Excellent message, Pastor Andy. And yeah, so how do we move on to where we're going for thought exchange today? Well, we promised you 2 weeks ago that when Pastor Ron got back that we would go into the thoughts that came up back then, and also, of course, have to do with refocusing the church. And so we're looking at the issue of tithing this morning. And in fact, if you notice through Luke chapter 18, money came up more than once in that passage. For those of you who don't know what Thought Exchange is about, let me just explain it a little bit. The QR code that's on the screen there today is one of the ways that we can enter into the thought exchange. The thoughts that you put into this are put in such a way that it's anonymous. We don't know who's giving what thoughts here. And so we welcome you to go ahead and do that. And Pastor Ron just reminded me to say goodbye to the Facebook people. And so you people on Facebook, I think you're going to miss a real good one this morning. I think you should come and join us over in our Zoom chat. So that's found on vcop.ca and in our online worship. And please come join us for the chat portion. We'll say goodbye to you for now. Thanks for joining us. And let me just copy the link into the form here for you as well.
Pastor Andy, can you just kind of share a little bit on the using the, or Pastor Blake, the thought exchange for anyone that's not familiar with it, with the phone and stuff?
Yeah. So if you want to join with us, you can use the link that I just put into the chat box. That'll take you into our thought exchange for this morning. Otherwise, you can take your camera on your phone and point it at that QR code, and it'll allow you to go directly to the thought exchange. Or you can go to tejoin.com and enter in the number that you see on screen. So our thought for this morning is, what are your thoughts and perspectives on tithing, giving 10% of your income to the local church? And I suspect this could be an interesting conversation this morning. So I'll give you some time without me yattering at you to go ahead and put.
Just pipe in here and say, if you haven't started starring thoughts at this point, once you've done sharing your thought, go to the next step and assign stars on a 5-star scale. Just weighing in on thoughts, whether they resonate with you or not. And feel free to rate high or rate low based on the resonant feeling you have around the perspectives that are shared. Looks like we have about 6 people per thought. It would be good to get, with 18 participants, it'd be good to get that number up closer to 18. So if you haven't started starring thoughts, jump to that step now and assign stars one thought at a time.
Let's start off with the one that's currently on top. It might not be after all the ratings come in. The more you give, the more you realize nothing you have really is yours. Pastor Ron, how do you feel about this one? The more you give, the more you realize nothing you have is really yours.
It's a good statement. I don't know, the more you give, the more you realize that nothing's yours, but I do realize that sometimes this gets misconstrued with tithing. When you give, you get more. Sometimes the very opposite can happen. And again, it's more about a trusting in God, regardless of what you experience.
Yeah, not this one per se, but in the top ones here about heart posture and sort of the yeah, just the trust and faith that I see represented in these. I have to agree. I rated these thoughts when I saw them really highly. I think there is a revelation that comes from a simple act of obedience like this, that goes beyond the material of giving and then the amounts in all of that. And so whether that's your revelation that everything you have is from God, and we're required to steward it all, including time and resources and money and all of those things, in a way of wisdom. I think this is just another example of some material, really practical material we can interact with, that reflects what's in the heart and reflects our measure of faith. But I also think that I just sent you a little note as well, Blake. I think there's some really, there in this particular exchange, there will be some value in looking at some of the things where there's some differences of opinion. It's not necessarily that only the top thoughts where there's a high degree of resonance are in this exchange. There's some like-minded thoughts, and then there's some pretty big differences of perspective, and I think those are all really valid. I just wanted to highlight that in case you missed it.
Yeah, good. Just scrolling down. Let me just refresh one more time here. It's interesting. This one was similar to what was on top that you just discussed.
You know, as we were discussing these, I think as Pastor Andy's message on the quadrants is tithing is a great illustration on which quadrant we're functioning out of. I remember my one pastor friend, he called it the blackmail. When people didn't get what they want, they threatened to take back their tithe. And I thought that's such a good response in the negative, because many people try to hold the preaching into a blackmail setting. When they don't get what they want or want to hear, they basically start to withhold. And I think that quadrant is a great check, because if you're not giving, why? And if you are giving, why? You know, what's the reason behind your action?
Yeah, like this particular comment here, Pastor Ron. I agree. However, it's difficult to sort in mind that without a building, the money I give only goes to wages and not the upkeep of the building. It's easier to give when we have a building place to congregate in.
Yeah, I'm going to let someone else pipe in on this. I have my opinions, but I'd like to hear what others' thoughts are.
Well, the first thing that came to my mind when I read it is that the tithe originally in the Old Testament was all to go to the Levites. Had nothing to do with the building. So it.
Very true.
Yeah.
If I can join this part of the conversation, I'd like to. So I really, first of all, I hear the thought. So, and I think that while I agree with what Blake said, I think that there's a relevance to our unique time and space here in Penticton in 2021 that that's just valid. We don't have a building. Most churches do. Most of the tithe goes to the building in places where the church doesn't own the building or they're paying it off. Like that's the lion's share of the financial, where the finances go. And having done this, and so I really recognize and can validate the feeling that when we don't have a building, and so many other churches do, and that's where the money goes, we're different. In this moment, we're different. We had a building. I wasn't here when we owned it, but it didn't work. It wasn't a good thing. I know that much. It worked in that we had a building, but it was a from what I have been told, there was nothing wonderful about the building, and it was a giant splinter in the foot of Victory Church of Penticton, which was the reason the building was sold. Furthermore, having been through a building purchasing consideration, high lease payment scenario before coming to Penticton, something like the balance sheet is something that I personally combed over in my last application of ministry in a huge way, and it really did dictate what my former church was able to do and what we plan to do when faced with the exact same question we're faced with. Do we buy a building? Do we rent a building? Do we lease a building? Do we continue doing what we're doing? Do we meet in the park? What are the things that we have to go on? If you were at the AGM, and we didn't talk about it explicitly, but if you're at the AGM with our current finances, there's no way we can support a monthly building based on the monthly balance sheet, in my opinion. Now I might be missing something, but so we have this amount of money from the sale of the last building. We have proven throughout the year that we can't support a building, and so we're looking. So we're based on the giving, and so we're looking at ways to make do with the finances that are coming in. And so on the one hand, I really want to validate and I gave this thought a really high rating. I don't agree with the spirit behind it, but I gave it a high rating because I want to talk about it. The thing about it is, like, when we have a building and all of the money gets wrapped up in it, you really are forced to just go that way. And I don't think that having a building will result in more giving. I think we prove out with the material that we've got day to day where our sort of our commitments lie. And so when you introduce another variable, I don't think it will change. My experience is that it won't change the amount that's given. So it's just simple wisdom to live within your means and make the decisions based on the resources that you've got. If we, and I made this point in the last, I preached about tithing a little while ago, and I made the point in that message that if we were, if there was even, and I'm not saying tithing is the answer, I'm just saying that if there was consistent minimum of 10% giving, we'd have no problem funding a building. We'd have the money in the coffers went down this year, not up. Now we have this money, as I understand, we have some money from the sale of the last building, and it will be enough for a down payment, but it's not enough to maintain monthly upkeep and lease payments or rent or mortgage payments. It's just not. And so if we want it to be like that, we need to be able to wear that kind of consistency in a way that allows Pastor Ron and the others, the board, to make wise decisions, and making the decision so that it's like people that the rationale that if we have a child that'll save our marriage. it's just not the case. It's not a wise way of decision making. A marriage that's struggling, and then we're like, okay, well, we need some other variable that will save us. The building, to me, holds that space. We would give more if we had more expenses. Doesn't seem like a rational decision to make. Just my opinion. I'm not speaking on behalf of anyone, just so we're clear. I'm not speaking on behalf of Pastor Ron or the board. I'm not on the board. I'm just sharing my opinion as a community member and a church member on this subject.
Thanks, Pastor Andy. Flora, I see you wanted to chime in.
Yes, thank you, Pastor Blake. So I wanted to chime in on that because I'm kind of seeing that I respect that opinion. I respect this person's opinion, but I'm kind of, understanding that we have come to that point, that Jesus talked about when he was talking to the woman at the well. He told the woman, he said, a time will come when you neither worship here nor there, So like, why I'm saying that is regarding having a building. I'm not against having a building, but we are the building. Every one of us is the building. And if we are given to build us up, like if the money that we tithe is used for thought exchange, like, this thought exchange thing, we are building ourselves up. And that way we are also servicing the building, which is us. Because the time we are in now is that time where you neither worship here nor you gather here, but you worship him in spirit and in truth. That is what tithing will do for us. We don't have to have a building in order to tithe. I respect this opinion, but this is my opinion. If we're able to build people, we are doing a lot with our tithing. Let me not, if you leave me, I will go on and on. But we are in that time when you neither worship here nor there. It is about building up people, I'm done.
Thank
Can I
you.
add something too?
Speak loud.
I just wanted to add something too. So the money that is coming in doesn't mean Pastor Ron, Pastor Blake are getting more money also. So it's not like they're taking more of a salary. Like the board has agreed on what their salaries are. And the money that comes in is going towards the purchase of a new building and, giving more into the community. So just to be more clear on that, just so you know, the money coming in, they're not pocketing it all. It's going towards, hopefully, like if we all could tithe the 10%, that money is going towards a really, really great building. So.
Yeah, and I think the other side of the equation here, at least in my understanding, and I'll say this is my opinion as well, is that we sometimes have to look at faith goals as well. I know with some of the work that I do overseas, we look at it and we pray about it and we believe that God is sending in a specific direction, and then we place it out before people, and that becomes part of the accountability process as well. Is God telling us at this point in time it's time to get a building? I'm not sure about that. Has the board come up with that decision? Has Pastor Ron led us in that direction? I haven't heard that at this point in time. But still, there's the aspect of faith. Like the blind beggar, if he didn't step out and shout out, he wouldn't have got healed. Sometimes you have to take that action as well. But you don't put it out as some do, and I'm not going to name any names that way, and go with, well, this is what God laid on our heart. We know that we have to have this $5 million building, and so we're going for it. I hope that's understandable there. Ding.
If anybody's listening, on in our chat there, feel free to unmute and chime in. I've got lots of answers, but I like to hear what everybody else's thoughts are. I love what the discussion.
Let's pop up to the top again for one. It's very important. The tithe is very important. It reminds me I can completely trust God with my finances. 100% agree with this one. Although I didn't get to rate it. I guess it wasn't quite there when I was doing my ratings. But yes, you can completely trust God with your finances. I can say that. And coming from experience, 100% of the time, he is trustworthy. Pastor Ron, there's a couple of things in here where I think there's a little bit of biblical understanding that needs to be talked about, because I don't think it's coming down to proper biblical understanding on it. Had you noticed some of those things?
Yeah. Like one of the things about the tithing, and there's a couple comments about Old Testament principles, and that's truthful. In fact, if you read Deuteronomy in the area of tithing, a lot of times they brought their food and their resources and they ate as a community, and that was considered part of the tithe, as well as giving to the Levitical priesthood. And then there's the comment about being an Old Testament principle. And in fact, tithing is 10%. That's the word. Tithe actually means 10%. 10% was a minimum, and because God put a standard. But if you read the New Testament, you don't hear the word tithe brought out, but you hear Paul in 2 Corinthians 9 especially is basically your model of tithing, where he says, if you give sparingly, you'll reap sparingly, and those who give with generous hearts, they'll receive a harvest of righteousness. And then again, you look at John 3:16 and a kind of a gateway passage of between the two Old and the New Testament in the life of Christ. And if you think about God so loved the world that he gave what, 10%, 20%, 50%? No, he so loved the world that he gave 100%. He gave himself. He gave his only begotten son, that whoever, and I remember a few years ago waking up with this revelation, if God was willing to sacrifice his reputation and himself 100%, how is it that I can't give 10% of my own time and resources in the area of the kingdom of God? And it was a real good open eye set, because I hear sometimes, and I know there's a little bit of a rant, and it's hard when you're the pastor. I had a lot of opinion on tithing prior to being a pastor, just so you're aware, and I've had a lot of stuff that I did that people would have a hard time. But the point of tithing is really about your heart. When I hear people say, well, I don't give because I give to this ministry and I give to this ministry and I choose where I give, I always come back to say, so basically you're giving to your ministry, not to the Lord. And I remember a church that I was a part of shutting down. And when it started shutting down, the people started going into that church and taking things and say, well, I gave this and I gave this. And I remember looking at people and say, were you giving to the church or were you giving to God? Because if you're giving to God, then it's up to him to decide what will happen. If you're giving to the church, well, then you can decide if you want a little name plaque on your chair or on the wall or this or that. And I think tithing is probably one of the best heart checks of our humility, just like the rich man, that parable in Luke 18 where Jesus said, sell everything and follow me. Was he selling us all to go sell everything? No, he was actually telling us to whatever you put before God as an idol. So if it's money, it's an idol. If it's your intellect, your position, your power, whatever that is, he's saying, you need to give that to me and follow me, and then I will bless you and give you the resources you need. And so tithing is just one of those resources. But anyways, I could go on forever. But yeah.
I'm wondering, Pastor Ron, if it's the word tithe that actually gets us into
I think
trouble
so.
in the New Testament, since,
I
as you fully said, there it is not a New Testament command. It is an Old Testament. It was specifically given to the Levites and the priests,
correct.
but there are no Levites and priests in the New Covenant whatsoever. And so now we're using that 10%, which, by the way, even though it was a tenth that Abraham gave to Melchizedek, which was, I might as well say that too, a one-time occurrence. He didn't continue to give 10% to him.
No.
10% as it was laid out in the Old Testament commands, it was far beyond that. It was 10% for this part and 10% for the poor and 10% for another part. And so the reality is, if you look at all the different tithes that Israel had to come up with, it's much closer to 20%.
Yeah. No,
So
right.
maybe
You can
it's that
also look
word
at the,
that I
you can
have.
also look at the Acts, early Acts church in 2 and 4. It didn't say they gave 10%. It says they sold their possessions, they laid it at the apostles' feet, and they gave and distributed amongst themselves. So that, in fact, one place it says there was no needy among them. And so percentage is more or less because the word tithe means percentage. I think it's been misdone. Like, I remember being a part of, you're robbing God out of Malachi 3 if you don't give of the tithe. Well, that's not giving with a cheerful heart, like Paul says. And so, yeah.
Yes, and contextually, it really doesn't have anything to do with the Christian, because it was specifically speaking about rebuilding at that point in time.
Yeah.
And for Jerusalem, and again, it's pre-New Covenant. So
Yeah.
we
But I will clarify, in my whole life as a follower of Christ, so it came back in 1994, I have given a minimum of 10%, oftentimes over 10%, always to my local church. And I've always, even now as a pastor, I give 10% to my local church, which is here. And I also have given over and above to other areas of ministry, and God's blessed me. It's not that that's the reason. I mean, it started off, maybe that way of being blessed, but it's just, to me, it's more my heart. If I'm going to demand God and tell God where I'm going to tithe, or then I'm really being the Lord and not God. And so he says give, so I give.
and the comment that's before us here kind of speaks to that as well. The more you give, the more God is compelled to replenish you in your giving.
Yes.
Actually, no. There's nothing biblical about that statement. I think I understand where they're coming from, that God is such a good giver. I mean, I've never outgiven God. And sometimes if we look back on, especially on our tithing throughout our lives, the percentage was much higher than 10%. And he does sustain us. But to say that he is compelled to replenish you is not a biblical statement.
Like when we begin to see tithing in the light of, our hearts, like that was my thoughts. That was my thought. I've always known that it's a heart issue. If it's just like when you have a $1 billion house, you will be so particular about that house. You would tend it. You won't want anything to happen to it. That's just the way it is. If where we give is where our heart goes.
Mhm.
Because if we're giving to the Lord through tithing, we're the things about the gospel, the things about God will be right here. You know, you will be all, and even you as a person, you know, because you're giving to the Lord through tithing, God is in your heart. You know, you're not, you want everything good, you know, because you know that you're giving, you know, to the Lord. So it kind of keeps your heart in
Yes.
check. Yeah, it's a hard thing. It's not about it's not even about what we get back.
Yes.
It's about we being in good standing and good relationship with the Lord.
Yes.
Yeah. So if we
Very
see
good.
it as when we give, we just want to, you know, remain in good standing. We don't want to forget him, because it's so easy to be carried away by the things of this life.
Mhm.
But you know, that tithing keeps you in check, because that's where your sweat is going to every month. That's where your money is going to. Yeah.
Good word, Flora.
Very good. Yeah. Where is your heart?
I'd like to say something.
Go
This
for
is
it.
me. I was saying, like I was talking with Sharon, and I said to Sharon, I said, you know, it's good having Zoom, and you know, maybe we don't need a building. And she reminded me that if we say we witness to somebody and we ask them, you know, we witnessed them and they want to know more about the Lord, and where do we take them? Are people going to take them in their house and say, I'll teach you, have them live with you? How many people would do that? So I think maybe that we do need a building. She reminded me, and I was grateful for that. We do need a building. And I like with the tithing we pay, that is for the building. That's my opinion. That's all.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, how many people would take these people that they witness to into their home? You know, are you going to have your house full of them?
I guess I would look at that to answer that one, Denise, is what did the early church do that had no buildings and yet they grew?
They had one house, I guess, one
No, it
place.
said they met in Acts 2 and 4. It says they met home to home and house
Yeah.
to house. And
Yeah.
so they actually did take the people into their homes and they discipled. That's why small groups are important.
So like, but what I'm saying is, are people willing to bring even one person in their home to look after them? That's all I'm saying. Like for myself, if I witness to somebody and say, oh yeah, well, you can come into my home, I can't have them come and stay in my home. I can't. We're not allowed to. So I'm just saying that.
Yeah, that's fine.
But
Andy, you had something to.
Yeah, I respect that, Denise. I want to just, I mean, this wasn't, I didn't know we were going to do this conversation today, but I want to, maybe I can speak on behalf of the leadership on this one. I don't think that the nature of the conversation is saying that we don't want a building, or that we're not planning on having a building. So I think the point is well made. If you're like, yeah, are we willing to evangelize in such a way that our homes are open? Maybe that's something we should consider. Absolutely. I think it's separate from a conversation about tithing and where the tithe goes either to a building or not.
Mhm.
Because the question is just about tithing. The point of the building bit is really well made, Denise. I feel like if we're willing to put the tithe toward a building, I think that's pretty culturally appropriate, and I really respect that. And I would agree with you. I think we do need a building. The type of building, the way that decision is being made, is informed by lots of things, including the tithe. And I just wanted to just name that. I don't want people that are on this call to have it, you know, as much as it depends on me and my thoughts, be like, because we don't have a tithe, that's why we don't have a building. That's not the point I was trying to make, or trying to make a point that we shouldn't have a building.
That's good.
And I fully believe that when the time comes that we are back meeting together, God will not only provide the place that we're meeting together, but he will provide the funds for that place so that we can meet together.
If I might here, please, gentlemen.
Go ahead, Kevin.
I must agree with Pastor Blake. And this is the thing. When we need a building, we'll have a building. We require one. Denise, you're absolutely right. Sharon, you're on point. But now is not the time. Not yet. But the tithing, it's the first commandment of the 10, of the Decalogue, of the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. It's a heart check. This is all tithing is. God's preparing us, right? And this is why we've been in this stone mill for the last 6 months. If you're feeling the grinding, that's just your flesh, my flesh. I feel it. Trust me. My flesh will pop up all the time. But so I'm not pointing fingers. I should talk about myself. It's not a. God has always provided in our church. I've been part of this church since its inception, and I have seen the hand of God move even in our foolishness. So I am confident in his ability to provide for us. Tithing, for Pearl and I, she's always tithed. I can't cost the benefit of what we've received from God. I tithe, I give. It's what cost can I put on his love, right?
Good. Yeah, I think, the tithing and stuff like that, great question, great input and stuff like that. I think we'll probably wrap up now, but the tithing is, Kevin, well spoken. It's not about the 10%. We get debating on the name and claiming or don't name and claim, and we debate all these formulas and rebuke and fight over doctrines of giving and stuff like that, which is really stupid. Tithing is about your heart. Jesus says, wherever your treasure lies, your heart lies. And so just getting back to Pastor Andy's sermon, which was a phenomenal sermon. I wished I could preach that good myself. But the truth of that paradigm he was talking is the action, the feelings, the emotions, and I can't remember the other two quadrants, but all those, or the thinking and all those things. Why don't you tithe? That's my question. A few years ago, the Lord put on my heart about, evangelism, prayer, tithing, all the disciplines that we talk so much about in church. And I said, Lord, what is it? Why don't we read our Bibles? Why don't we give money? Why don't we do? He says it's because our relationship with him is shallow. And the deeper you go into a relationship with Jesus, and the deeper you love him and you accept that he will provide, and there'll be lots of challenges and stuff that will happen in our lives, the more free we are, not only with our money, but with our praying, our reading the word. And so and evangelizing, all those disciplines are a response to our love for God. And remember, John 3:16 said, for God so loved us, and who is God? God is love. So therefore, if we are in deepening relationship with a God who is love, the outpouring of that relationship will be all the other disciplines, your morality, your attendance, all those things are a direct revelation. Am I in love with Jesus, or am I in love with myself? Really. And tithing is just one of those little frameworks. But it could be reading your word. It could be church attendance. It could be a building. It could be a codependent relationship. It could be an addiction. Those things are a reflection of our heart, and God's trying to remove the fleshly mindsets, because we're going to battle those till the day Jesus comes back. But he's going to remove those things as we deepen our relationship with him, because it says, out of your innermost being will flow rivers of living water. Therefore, if our relationship with God is vibrant and pursuing, living water, the blind man's healing eyes, the all that other stuff will begin to flow out of your lives and flow into your lives. And God is a river. It's not a slough. A slough holds on and it gets stinky and algae, but a river is always giving out. It's always being refreshed and always giving out. And kind of what, the replenishing aspect that that one comment was, yeah, God isn't compelled, but it does compel him to continue to give, because as he sees us give out, he can't be outgiven. And that's kind of 2 Corinthians 9. That's the whole principle. Paul says you can do whatever you want with your money. If you want to hang on to it, hang on to it. But remember this, you're stingy, you get stingy harvest. And so whether that's with love, resources, time, whatever, the way you compel your life will be what you'll receive back. It's a reaping and sowing principle, which again is in the 2 Corinthians 9. So I love the conversation on tithing, and don't take this as you got to tithe. What my question and what I would leave you with is the very thing Andy with his sermon brought out, is in every area of your life, which quadrant are you operating on? Is it a positive or a negative? And are you operating out of that quadrant from past hurts or pride or whatever it means? Are you operating because you love God? Because if you're giving to receive, don't bother. God doesn't need your money. He doesn't need you. He's God. What he wants is you and your heart. And he wants a relationship with you, and he wants to love you, and he wants you to receive the love he has for you. And he wants you to be transformed into all he's called you to be. Whether it's a teacher, a politician, a helper, he's wanting to transform your life from glory to glory and from faith to faith, and to give you freedom, as 2 Corinthians chapter 3 and 4 speak about. So give cheerfully, but judge yourself. Judge yourself and ask, why am I doing what I'm doing? Why do I attend church? Why do I read my Bible? Anyways, you're getting a whole bunch of sermons because I had a week and a half off. Hallelujah. I could go on. It could be like Eutychus, you'll all fall out of your window. Then I'll have to come, and I probably won't lay on you like Paul did to revive you. I'll probably bring a hearse and pick you up and take you back to my old funeral home. But if I continue preach, that's what will happen. You'll fall out of the window. Anyways, you guys are awesome. And I do, thanks for giving. Thanks for the message, Pastor Blake last week I listened to, and Pastor Andy this week, and all of you for being a part of this. And go pursue Jesus. Pursue that relationship, because out of that relationship, everything else will figure itself out and flow, for he's our wisdom.